Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Because Football podcast. This is your host, Andrew, and today our guest is Tom Fry, technical scout of Port Vale Football Club of the League Two in England, as well as director of football for the University of Central Lancashire. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. No, for sure. So obviously for people watching maybe for the first time or listening, I am a Vale supporter. I'm not going to go super deep into that story right now, but somehow this guy from Philadelphia follows little Port Vale and was of League One, now again of League Two, and hopefully again soon of League One. But that's kind of the connection here. And obviously I was excited to chat with you for that reason, but also wanted to start and take it back a little bit to your childhood in Cumbria in the north of England. And what was like the first earliest memory you have of football?
I was kind of late into football, really. I was probably about 10 when I started like in my first team. So playing football at primary school was like the thing that I kind of probably remember first.
Right.
Just like them little like kickabouts at playtime and lunchtime, just pick a team at the start and then try and win, I guess. But for some reason I could quite like all right in them games, and then when I joined the team I was like struggling a little bit. But yeah, that's probably the earliest memory, and then I kind of got the bug and was addicted after that.
Yeah, is that like they say like what jumpers for goalposts area, right?
Yeah,
Basically just
exactly.
throwing
Yeah.
jackets down, marking out a goal and that. Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And tell us how you initially got kind of the interest and then started to actually make inroads to scouting.
I used to really, really like Football Manager, the computer, the computer game,
Yep. Oh yes, know it
and
well.
and I did a sports coaching degree at university, so I
Okay.
did coaching for a little bit, and then I actually got speaking to one of my old, it was from that first team actually that I played in. I got speaking to them again, like reconnecting after like many, many years. And it turned out he was actually at Port Vale, analyst there. He's now
Okay.
at Watford. He's head of performance analysis at Watford. But so I got speaking to him, and this is during COVID. So I was like, oh, like if you need me to do anything, like I'm not doing anything else at the moment. So give me a shout. So I started doing some performance analysis with him, like on an internship basis. And then the chief scout left like during that season, and
Okay.
there was kind of like a bit of a gap that I could jump into and do some like recruitment analysis. And then that's kind of where it twigged, where like going back to Football Manager, I would spend like days on a transfer window. Like I get the scouts going out. I'd be like looking at the reports, like what players are going to fit in the system, all that. And then I was like, okay, this is the path that I really want to go down. So I always knew I wanted to work in football, but it's like what aspect of it? Because I knew very early on it wasn't going to be a playing aspect. So
Sure.
um,
Yeah. So then how do we get a foothold,
yeah,
right? How do you kind of
yeah,
fight that
exactly.
itch? Yeah. Yeah. And for
Um,
sorry to interrupt real quick, for some, like maybe some people are not familiar with Football Manager, maybe more of like my American audience. I think I started playing it. I was probably 15, 16 when I first was exposed to it and playing like the desktop version. I've had multiple periods in my life, and a lot of people I think could attest to this, that Football Manager is probably the most addicting thing in the universe. Anybody else can come out with any other, substance, feeling, anything like that. Nothing touches Football Manager. And so I've literally had to consciously take myself away from it. Even the mobile versions, which are not nearly as in depth as the PC. I've really, and for the good of my own mental health and just success in life. Success in Football Manager is very important. You just get to be the manager plus the director of football. You're setting tactics. You don't actually play the game like in FIFA. You're not moving the players, but it's just levels of complexity in terms of tactical instructions, the halftime team talks, signing players, which I always found is one of the most fun parts too. So it's definitely wanted to clarify that for everybody. Don't think you're the only one that's kind of like taking that as a kind of template and then want to, good on you for moving into the actual world of football.
it's surprisingly realistic. Like some of the things that are on there, it is. I've heard. I don't personally do this myself, but I've heard of people using it as like a little scouting database for themselves, just to like highlight players. Yeah, it helped me get to where I am really, because kind of built that love for the game as well, which I think you need if you're gonna make it. You've got to like really, really want it because there's so many
Hmm.
different things that can get in the way whilst you're trying to make it in football. Got to work your way up, doing internships and
Yeah,
volunteering, and you know, it's if you think about when the games are, like a Saturday afternoon, it's maybe not the most um like social time for if you're
exactly.
working. So there's things that you got to sacrifice and to get where you want.
You mentioned you're kind of doing a bit of like intern work, and was that more like the performance analysis side at first with the Vale, kind of like an intern level?
Yeah, so that first year at Vale, so I did that on an internship basis, and then COVID kind of finished, and I got a job in a um a, a large primary school, so it was like a three-form entry primary school where they had like like sports coaches that did their PE. So I was doing that, and then I was then volunteering at Kings Lynn as like their chief scout.
Okay.
Really small club that had kind of built the way up into the National League. And Kings Lynn is in uh, Norfolk, which is like 4.5 hours from where I live. So that brought its own challenges, and you learn from that. There's always this little switch point where you go from being a volunteer, and then you obviously prove yourself, and
Hmm.
then trying to get over that little bridge of being and start being paid. Because obviously, like if someone's been giving you something for free, they don't really want to start then paying for it. But for yourself, like if you've proven your worth, then you're giving something of value.
Right.
So you deserve to be paid, in my opinion. But that kind of comes with the fact that you've got to prove it first. So then I managed to cross that at Kings Lynn, which was really good. I kind of fully committed to it, so I left like a really stable this sports coaching job, left that and kind of just went like all in on
Wow.
football.
Yeah.
And that's where I really got to see like the progress. That's where it really kicked on.
What do you think? You mentioned before really loving it, and then you're starting in a volunteer capacity, which from various scouts I've spoken to seems like a pretty common pathway. Send out a bunch of emails or go call on personal networks and contacts and get yourself into kind of a volunteer role, prove yourself, and then either, it's great. So within that club, you're able to move into a paid role. Is that right?
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
So
So
like, yeah,
yeah, so literally I done that process. So like being unpaid, they're kind of taking a risk on you because you've not really got like a really solid background
right.
to prove that you've done it before. So I was really grateful. Like you said, like firing off emails. Like I think I must have contacted like League One, League Two, National League, um, like National North, sort of all everyone. And Kings Lynn came back to me and gave me that chance. So,
Awesome.
that's all you need. It's sometimes it's just a chance. And then once you get that, then that's where you start really kicking on.
Yeah, and so you got to move into that role, which is great, but still National League. So I imagine it's like, and again, for people maybe not familiar, the football league proper is like those top four levels of the pyramid in England. You got Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two, and then you move into National League, which is still like a very established level. A lot of guys are full time, some are part time, and there's kind of varying sizes of clubs and resources and things in that as well. What then like made you leave that kind of comfortable coaching PE job? What do you think was the final feeling or straw or event that made you say, all right, I'm going to go all in here and take this risk?
I mean, I was quite lucky. Like my partner was really supportive with it. Like if if we didn't have the money, then I wouldn't have been able to do it. But I think the point that where I got to was like I was driving to work and I'd park up and like I would leave it till the last minute to go in because I knew I wanted to be somewhere else. I wanted to be like thinking about the Kings Lynn stuff or anything football related. And that's where like you really know like
Yeah.
if you're doing that, there's something wrong. So yeah, that's what the thing that really like made me do it was like, right, and someone needs to change here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think like if you really want something, you just gotta make it happen. Um, and some people are in situations where they maybe can't do that as quickly. So, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
I don't have any kids. Don't have like massive bills to pay or anything like that. So, other people might, if you have kids, then obviously you can't like live off
It's a
rice and
lot
beans
tougher.
for,
Exactly.
yeah, you've got to provide. So you can't just like quit your job sort of thing. But yeah, I'm like fortunate really.
Hmm.
But I was in a position where I could make that kind of sacrifice.
Yeah. That's a really great image you have of being in the car, in the car park, like right before work and just waiting to the last minute to go in. I can definitely identify with that. It resonates at different jobs I've had where you're just like, like you just feel that pit in your, for me, it feels like a pit in my stomach, right? Of just like, and not wanting, and resistance, resenting it. And yeah, so good on you for like taking the chance rather than not, and always wondering what if and potentially regretting and everything. Um, you mentioned kind of you're doing a bit of the scouting. I know you've been involved and probably have to collaborate with like performance analysts within the role. Like, could you clarify for us what would be? I know there's different elements of scouting as well. Like, what would be the difference between that scouting department and that role versus performance analysis?
So performance analysis is more on well the team and you could throw in the opposition team as well
Mm-hmm.
so which kind of there's that kind of blends with scouting as well like you do opposition scouting where you'll go and watch the opposition play you'll make notes
Okay.
on patterns of play that they do how big their players are for set pieces any set piece routines that's somewhere in the middle but it's more on the performance side I'd say and then yeah, the performance side, you're looking at your own team. Um, are they playing the way that you want them to play? Doing videos, meetings. It's really, really full on in terms of what the role is. Whereas scouting, flexible, I guess. Especially now that there's more video. Uh,
Okay.
you can you can watch games any time of the day, any place. Obviously, your live games are still pretty set. Saturday afternoons, Tuesday nights have been the main ones for the league. Um, then there's like PL2, Premier League 2, which like the Premier League's like academy teams.
Right.
They're quite scattered, but again, it might be a Friday night or a Monday night most of the time they don't really clash. So yeah, it's much more flexible in terms of your time and where you need to be at certain times. Um, there's days where I can work from home, whereas with performance analysis, like 95% of the time, you've got to be in the club because you need to be working with the coaches and delivering meetings and filming
Okay.
training
Yeah, it's a little
and
more
all that sort of thing.
hands-on. It's more like of a shorter cycle and like turnarounds, right? Because you're like with scouting, you have maybe general, especially for scouting players, right, to sign. You know that okay, we can't really make any movements until the January window or the summer window, so it's a little bit longer cycle. Whereas it sounds like with the performance analysts, you're getting data from the training sessions, you're getting data from the matches, and then immediately putting that into play. And there's probably more like immediate stakeholders involved as far as the technical staff that you're dealing with, maybe individual players too. Um, so yeah, so it sounds like a little bit more of a almost mirrors a little bit more of like the same cycles as a player is going through almost
Yeah,
of
exactly.
training
Yeah.
and playing.
The games they are set. So like if you run a 2 game week, you know you'll probably play the Saturday beforehand as well. So you'll come in the Monday, you've only got like 36 hours or something to prepare for the next game. Everything's
Hmm.
like you've got to work hard to smash it out. Whereas, yeah, like you said, you know, as soon as the summer transfer window is finished, our next like kind of deadline is the January in terms of like long term
Yeah.
deadlines. Obviously, there's meetings before that, and you're planning and
Hmm.
everything that goes into that. Like you don't just get to January and go, yeah, we're gonna do this today. Like, there's a lot
Exactly.
that goes
Yeah.
behind it. But yeah, in terms of like deadlines, um, they are much longer set than a performance analyst would do.
Like, what do you think is the difference between that? Is there could do you think you can get the same read on a player, the same feel for things with, granted it's like decent enough quality video, where you can actually see the match versus in person? Or do you have a preference for either one?
You get different things from different ones. So, for example, with video, like most of the time, it's quite high, which gives you a more like tactical view, which is really good for seeing like where their positioning is and
Yeah, you can see more at
um,
one time.
yeah, exactly. But what you don't get in that is like the verbal side. You won't hear them shouting. You won't. You might not see like if they're taking on instructions from the coach. Um, Body language is harder on video, especially if it's on the far side. Um, but yeah, I don't really have a preference. I think you need both to be able to make like a good judgment on a player.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, that at the end of the day, that's all you're trying to do is just get like a really well-rounded gauge on them. Then there's kind of the off the pitch stuff that you do for the research. Your manager might have a contact that has worked with them before, or someone within the team might have played with them before. And that's where you build like the character idea of what the player is like. You don't want any bad eggs in the group, but at
Sure.
the same time, you don't want everyone to be like best friends all the time and like soft. You want people that are going to battle for your club. You want to win games, and that's
Hmm.
ultimately what it comes down to. You want to win. Part of my role, I might need to go and find like an agent's phone number, um, and using my contacts and like research all that. Um, there'll be times when like you have to find out what the player is maybe earning, because there's no point like for me, there's no point going and finding a player and then you find out they're on 100 grand a week. It's like, well,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's just not doable. As much as I would like to be able to do that, it's just we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. So, I mean, you brought out so many things I'm thinking there that you're looking for. Obviously, like in the case of watching matches remotely, you can get a sense of a player's ability, their strengths and weaknesses, purely tactically, technically. Then you're looking for the mentality, the personality, communication skills, leadership, and that seems like more apparent in person, but especially from diving deep and talking to people that know the player. So those are a lot of things you think of. Okay, there's X hundreds and thousands of players that from that potential pool, and then slowly with each layer, you're kind of like narrowing like a funnel, narrowing that amount of players in the pool. At what point is it a certain amount of time, a certain amount of matches, just something that like a coach or an agent or another scout says? Is it a gut feeling you have? At what point are you ready and you feel confident of putting that player like on a list or submitting it to the club and saying, hey, here's somebody I think who could be a good fit?
It really varies, to be honest. Sometimes you can watch a player and like you've got player profiles. So for a position, say it was like a right back, you'd have a list of things that you want from a right back. And you might see like a couple games and go, wow, he's got everything that I want from that position. Say for a certain position, say for example, a goalkeeper, you might have like a strict rule that they can't be any smaller than a certain height.
Mm.
So like yeah, in terms of like you were saying, like filtering the players out and crossing names off and stuff. sometimes you can do that really quickly and you go, well, they're just not physically what we need. So you strike them out quickly, and then other ones you might go through like a more longer process of going, well, I didn't see this in this game, but that doesn't mean they don't have that attribute. So you'll keep doing your work, um and yeah, some things kind of depend on other clubs as well. So for example, loans, you've got to go through the process of, do they want that player to go to you as much as you want that
Yeah.
player to come to you? Whereas like if you're buying someone, it's more about like the financial side. And if you can do that, then it's much quicker. Loan club, like a Premier League club, they might go through a process of sending someone to the club and like having a look at your facilities and talk to people and making sure that that's the right environment for that player to really kick on and develop, because that's what they generally want is their player to go into the best environment to become a better player for them in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah. So much to really goes into it.
Yeah.
I'm always curious too about the like that financial side, because you have, okay, is a player a good fit for our system, what we're looking for personality wise? Do they seem like somebody we want to have within the community of the club and within that social group? And then it's like, you got to get down to the details with the agents and the numbers and contracts when they end and close. Is any of that like published and accessible, or is it all kind of private conversations to really find out? And does it depend? Like, I'm sure different parties might have an advantage to gain from not being 100% accurate with certain things and trying to get more, or whatever it is. Like, how do you kind of suss those things out when there's not an obvious or clear source of that information?
Yeah, I mean that's why I think, AI is trying to take over the world, but there's some things that it just will not replace. Negotiation is definitely one of them. Um, you know, you've got to be able to um kind of suss people out. Some people are going to be pushing for, like, everyone wants to get paid more.
Of
So
course.
you got to try and work out how to, like, who's got the leverage in a situation. Um, say for example, like now, if there's a player that it hasn't got a contract, and your team's like pretty comfortable in what they are, then you might be able to get a really cheap player right now because they haven't got a team, they haven't got any money coming in, um, and they need a club to play. Um, we're in a part of the season now where like everyone's done pre-season. We're like 13 games in, so they've all built their fitness. Whereas this player might not be match fit. You got to build them up, and that all like builds into the leverage of the club. So the club is in a really strong position there. So the wages are probably going to be much lower for the player than maybe if it was like deadline day and
Right.
they needed to buy someone,
Yeah.
especially if it's like a striker or something. The player is in a position of power there where they can go, well, if you want me, you got to pay me, sort of thing. So yeah, a leverage is quite a big thing, um, and that's with any negotiation for anything, I guess. But yeah, so there is something called transfer room, which a lot
Okay.
of clubs have, which they can put in like how much they're looking for a player. Again, though, you don't know if they're like bluffing. Like you could say a player's on like £10,000 a week when maybe they're actually only on eight, or vice versa, just to try and make something happen.
All right, so it's like a private. I'm actually pulling it up now. So it is kind of like a
Yeah,
private service that then
yeah,
clubs almost volunteer that information.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Very cool. Interesting. All right. But yeah, like you said, it could be part of a more elaborate game of smoke and mirrors there, and you're not really sure how legitimate it is. And then the details matter of, is it like in general player's price or wage could be this, but if it's a place he really wants to go or really doesn't want to go, all those things kind of factor into it. So that's getting to some of like the challenges, because I imagine as a scout, you have a profile that the club is generally giving you. You probably have your own taste and feelings about a player too, but ultimately you do have to listen to those decision makers, a director of football, a manager, whoever it is within the club. And then it's like you can find so many good players, dozens, hundreds, and maybe none of them sign or such a small percentage because of all the complexities. So it definitely sounds like, it's a lot of work with, if that's how you judge yourself of a player actually signing and then of course succeeding, like it's a lot of trial and error for a really small percentage of success. What's been one of those toughest lessons you've had to learn within football? Right.
Well, I think the biggest thing I've kind of learned between kind of the roles, Kings Lynn being remote and Port Vale being like in-house, it's just so much easier and more effective to be in the building. You might be not even be in the conversation, but you might hear a conversation, and that like you get like little nuggets of information that make your job a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not in that office at that time at that conversation, then you don't hear that. And so if you're working remotely all the time, and I did go down to Kings Lynn, I did make the drive and I'd spend like a few days there at a time, but you only get so much information in that short spell of time, and you don't get if someone didn't train very well, or if something slightly changes in a profile, and you just, unless you're speaking to them every day and listening to them, and or even just like watching the way the team trains, you don't get that information. So that is probably the biggest thing. It's just being part of it. It just makes everything a lot easier.
Interesting. It's interesting you say that. I'm surprised by that because to me, from my vantage point, a scouting role seems like, I don't know, I'm just going to pull a number out. Let's say 80% of your involvement and interaction is with people outside the club, and only like 20% is inside. Again, I'm making that up, but my perception is that you kind of get your lists. It's pretty cut and dry. It's pretty standard. This is who we're looking for. This is maybe your territory that you're scouting or the levels you're scouting. And maybe there's some discussion of where to look and some of that feedback. But for the most part, I would think that it's just, hey, it's pretty simple. Here's our positions, blah, blah, blah. Here's what you're supposed to look for, and then go. So it's interesting to hear you say that actually being more connected with the club internally can make such a big difference to your role.
Yeah, I mean, you do get given like your profile, and they're detailed, but like it's the finer details that, and sometimes you might put forward a player, and for whatever reason that the manager or whoever the decision maker is, they might say, "Oh, not quite sure on him," and then you can then get that little bit of extra details like, "Oh, why is that?" And then they'll be able to tell you on kind of on the spot. It's like, "Oh, because of this," and then you get your profile, but it's never like a complete profile. You're always adding to it, because at the end of the day, we're always trying to get better as well. So like we might get everything that we want on a profile, but then to get better, you've got to add to that profile. So it's always going to be like evolving. If we get to the championship, we're not going to be looking at players that for like League Two level. You got to be looking for better players. Whether that's like fitter or might be something that they do tactically that's different. The hardest time I think is when a manager changes, like you get a different manager in, your profile
Yes.
can be completely different.
Yes.
You're not starting from scratch, but like you've got to like reassess everything, because a player for one manager might not be acceptable, but for the next one it might be like the perfect fit. So yeah, it's just being ready for that, and being able to adjust yourself, because like you said earlier, you might have your own kind of preference on players, and
Yes.
like bias is a big thing in scouting, and you've got to be really aware of your biases and kind of cut them out. It's like the managers. My preference for a player might be different to what the manager likes, but I've got to be aware that it's not for me, it's for the manager, and we've got to
100%.
like adapt to that. You know, if the manager wants to play like tiki-taki football, then you've got to switch to that style. If you want to go like more direct, you got to switch to that. It might be, you know,
We're going to spare you the hot topic conversation of the traditional manager makes all the signing decisions versus a director of football, because I know that's a transformation that the Vale has even been undergoing, and that's been like something that, you know, keeping my ear to the ground as a conversation. The other thing you brought up that I'm interested about is you mentioned, okay, thinking about, okay, if the goal is to get to the championship level or we move up a level, you know, how does that change your profiles and what you're looking for? With the Vale specifically, the last 2 seasons were in League One, then relegated down to League Two. Could you give us an example of like how that profile might change, or is it like the type of players you're looking at? Does that change to prepare for a League Two season versus a League One? And what might be something that we wouldn't think of as, you know, football lay people not within that specialized role like you are, that would be a difference between scouting for players of those levels?
this year it's been slightly different because like obviously our aim has been always to get back up. So
Sure.
like and when you get back up, you want to be kind of like halfway there to being ready to stay up, and push on again. And like, you know, we're a really ambitious club. We don't want to like be scrapping relegation every year.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be up there. So like it does kind of open a different market up. So like say for example, the National League, it makes decisions a bit easier because you know that the player doesn't need to jump to a certain level straight away. You know, if we were in League One, a National League player, you'd maybe have a few more doubts over whether they can make the jump.
Yeah, because
Whereas
that's
like,
2 levels, right? Yeah,
yeah,
you're going
exactly,
to,
yeah.
yeah.
Whereas when you're going into League Two, it's only one level, and then they're having a really solid season at League Two, and then they're ready to make the jump again. And it's kind of like being able to adapt in a slower process than having to go boom up into League One sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
League One, you might look a little bit more international at times. The competition for players is even more. League Two, yeah, you can be a bit more flexible with like the National League, maybe Scotland as well. Ireland, yeah, again, you know, being able to judge the the different levels of different countries can be quite hard, and it depends on your resources as well. But yeah, I'd say that that's like the biggest difference. And for me, like the biggest difference in League One to League Two is like the physical aspect. So in League Two, like you've got to be quite robust and like it's strength and like muscle and all
Yeah, a
that
bit
sort of
more of
thing.
a battle, right? A little bit more like
Yeah.
the physical confrontation is more present.
Whereas like League One, you know, you still have to be like really physically fit, like you got to be able to run. But there's then the technical aspect as well. They've got to be able to like technically do all the like there's more like playing out from the back and um you know patterns of play and things like that that is more intricate,
Mm-hmm.
and that they've got to have the technical skills to be able to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think the perspective of the club, like you mentioned, with the Vale wanting to kind of shoot right back up, it would be different that with a different type of leadership or situation or, you know, resources. Like a club might say, hey, well, we just need to kind of stay here, and it changes. So that's an interesting insight. Um, what would you say after being within kind of different levels of football, within different roles? What advice would you give to someone, whether it's a more like a career decision advice or like actual something technical within like how to scout in general? What would you tell someone who's like just trying to get started?
Um, well, with anything, I mean, you've got to be able to put time into it. Um, if your current job doesn't allow that, then you're probably not going to be able to go down that route. Um, yeah, experience is the key thing for me. And getting that from whatever like source you can. So whether that's like doing your research, um, getting like hands-on experience is probably the most important experience. So that's whether that's like volunteering or yeah, internships,
Hmm.
things like that. Because with an internship and volunteering, they are taking a risk on that person, because if they had the skills, then they would be paid, if that makes sense. So, or if they had the experience of being in a club previously, it's almost like an assumption that they've got the skills needed already. So, like when you're starting out, it's like it's like with teachers. If they go to university, they do all their studying and all the courses, and they do placements to get that experience. And scouting's the same. Like you've still got to go and get your experience from somewhere, and learn the trade,
Right.
um and the little skills, things like where do you get your contacts, and building your contacts, and all them little things that you know you are. And then, like I said earlier, there is that jump between the volunteering and the paid role, and some people I feel don't understand like that you've got to earn your stripes, sort of thing. I think that's probably the hardest bit, like, but yeah, getting experience at whatever level, and really committing to it is probably the biggest thing.
Awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like you've seen some people within football who are like, okay, I've been doing the volunteer thing for X amount of months or years. And it's just the natural progression that now I start to get paid, but they haven't necessarily shown that they're like an elite performer and showed that they're really worth it, especially in an industry that, those pounds, those resources really have to be spent wisely.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's been volunteering for like years, then you, there's the chances are that they have got that experience now, and they probably do need to like be paid. But like the thing with football is as well, like, there's an obvious timeline. It's a season, so you might say like 1 season or 2 seasons of volunteering, and then you're kind of ready.
Mm-hmm.
And that's some people will look at that and go, yeah, that's generally like what my timeline would be. But yeah, it just depends on what you can produce and how quickly, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, if your level is like really high straight away, like, and you've done your research and took all that on board and stuff, then there's no reason why you couldn't do that jump really quick. For me, like everyone's got to prove themselves first, and the clubs are taking a risk by like bringing you in on that sort of thing. So it'd
Mm-hmm.
be even more of a risk to just go, right, we're going to pay you from the start, and then what if they weren't any good?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Like you said, earning your stripes, putting that time in, and it's something if you're expecting quick success and to get like your dream role all of a sudden, that's definitely not the route to go down. Because it sounds like it's definitely years of paying your dues and then again taking another step and more effort and more fighting to make things happen for yourself, as you said. But no, this is brilliant. I definitely learned and got a lot of great insight. We've had a one or two scouts on before, so I feel like I'm getting a clear picture of kind of what that looks like and more insight, and hopefully our audience and everybody watching too. And you've given great advice and feedback for people who might want to step down this path. Brilliant, Tom. Well, we really appreciated having you on. Thanks for sharing your experiences, the highs and the lows there, and some of the trade secrets going on behind closed doors. The way that we finish every episode, I'd like to pose the same question to you: is could you complete the sentence "because football"?
well, for me, because football just such a big part of my life, every aspect of like what I do is probably based around football. I go to the gym because I want to be better for my football. I play like Sunday league,
Okay.
so like that's why I go to the gym, is so that I'm better at football. My coaching, scouting, every day, pretty much every day of the week has some form of football, because football is why I'm doing what I do, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So not only just like purely a passion, but kind of a motivator, right? And a motivational source for for what you're trying to do and achieve with your life. Do you still have time in between all of those different roles to play Football Manager, or have you put that on hold for the time
I kind of got to this point where I was like, what's the point in playing it when I can just work?
There
And
you go.
that's
You're
kind of
living it, man.
that's
That's
kind of
badass. That's awesome right there. That's
yeah. I
awesome.
mean that's kind of the way I view it. Is like I've gone from that like doing it as a game. For me, it's still fun as a
Yeah.
job. So I mean, like,
Yeah.
why put time into that when I can do it properly and do it and have like something like bigger to show for it, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, when I said about like being in the car earlier and like you just don't want to get out to go to your mundane job that you're doing, it's like once you've done that process of swapping over and doing what you really want to do, that situation is the complete opposite. You get to
Yeah.
the car park and you want to jump out the car and like get in the
Hmm.
office and you go and attack the day. Yeah, I don't make time for Football Manager because I make more time to do what I'm
100%.
enjoying.
Yeah. That's awesome. Cool. Great answer. Great insight, Tom. We
Yeah.
appreciate it. And we appreciate everybody watching, giving us your time. And hopefully you guys have learned something as well. So, Tom, we're going to put your info for your LinkedIn and any other links and stuff you want there. So if anybody wants to connect, get in touch, recommend some new Wonder Kid footballer to the Vale, we'd appreciate that. Make Tom's job easy for him. And give me something to cheer about. So, Tom, thank you so much. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.